Welcome back to another rendition of Backpacking Basics here. This is the third installment,
number 3,
of this Emmy Award-winning outdoor series.
Trace.
Today we are going to be talking about shelters. So this is the first episode that's really going to dig deep into a really important part of your setup. We are going to talk about tents, like regular tents. We're going to talk about ultralight tents. We're going to talk about hammocks. We're going to talk about bivvies.
Yeah, so obviously when you're getting into backpacking, you need a shelter. That's part of what we call your big 3. So it's important to be educated on the different options that are available, the different pros and cons. So yeah, and you know, the best thing that you can do for yourself is get into an outdoor retailer, look at some stuff, get online and research and see what works for you. But yeah, we're gonna go through some options here.
All right, so this is the Gossamer Gear, the One. It's an older version, so this is an ultralight tent that we own. Anyway, so some of the advantages are, it is super lightweight. It is, because of the materials they use, it's very lightweight material and fabrics, but that also makes it pretty expensive. So disadvantage to ultralight tents, they cost a lot of money, but super lightweight and packs down really small. So those are the advantages and disadvantages to an ultralight tent. All right, so this is just your basic run-of-the-mill freestanding tent that most people will start out backpacking with. Advantages to these, they're cheap, they're affordable. Everybody's got them, everybody makes them. I think this is a Marmot. This is actually my first tent. With these freestanding tents, you just pop some poles in there, put these little plastic clasps on there, and the thing sets up itself. Now, disadvantage, this thing weighs a lot. I think this thing weighs around 5 or 6 pounds. Now, obviously, tent technology has gotten a lot better. They're a lot lighter now, but still, when we're talking freestanding tents in general, they are much heavier and much bulkier than your ultralight tent, but they're so much easier to set up and they're so much cheaper. So it just depends on what you want. All right, so we're moving on to hammocks now. So hammocks is our preferred method. Biggest advantage that we've found for hammocks is that our quality of sleep is just so much better in a hammock. Invest in sleep. Invest in sleep. So hammocks are a lot more complicated. They take time to learn how to use a hammock. Additionally, with a hammock, you don't have to go searching around for level ground. All you gotta do is find 2 trees with decent spacing apart and you get your hammock set up. Doesn't matter if you're on the side of a hill, whatever. Don't have to worry about the ground being unlevel. However, then you've got to worry about trees and finding the right type of trees.
So the final sleeping system we haven't talked about is something I call the coffin, or what's known as a Bivy Sack. And this is not a Bivy Sack you're looking at. This is actually the Warbonnet Blackbird hammock, but a nice pro to hammocks is they can also be used as Bivy Sacks if needed. Bivy Sacks that are like actually meant to be Bivy Sacks will have some sort of system to keep the bug net a little bit up off your face, but they're just a sack, like a sleeping sack, and they're really popular with ultralighters. I will say, I never thought I could ever sleep in a Bivy Sack ever, but after sleeping in a hammock for a while now, I think I could, as long as this was up far up enough off my face. I think I could do a Bivy Sack.
Okay, so we've seen those the different shelter options, so let's just go through real quick the pros and cons. So the ultralight shelter, obviously the pro there is that it's super lightweight and it compresses really small. It also, another pro is it uses your trekking poles to set it up, so you have a lot of weight savings where you don't have to carry around tent poles or anything like that. Con, they're expensive and they're more complicated to set up. So let's talk about just your standard freestanding tent, as I call it. So pros on that, they're everywhere. Everybody makes them. They're at every different store. They're super easy to set up. So when we say freestanding, they generally come with some tent poles, it all clips together. and it's really easy to use. Now the con is they weigh a ton. So
They're bulky too.
they're bulky and they weigh a lot. That was my first backpacking tent, the Marmot we just showed you, and I think that thing's 5 or 6 pounds, which is pretty crazy. But when I bought it, it was like $80, so it was really cheap. So hammocks, what are the pros and cons to hammocks? The pro is you get a fantastic night's sleep, in our opinion.
Yeah.
The cons are the system is very expensive, and it can be a little finicky. It takes a little while to learn.
There's a learning curve.
There's a big learning curve with it, but as we always say, invest in sleep. That'll ensure you have a pretty good trip. So we prefer the hammock.
Another huge pro to hammocks is you don't need to find flat ground.
Yep.
But a con is you got to find good trees. So there's kind of a trade-off, but I think it's easier to find, depending on where you live, especially in the Midwest, it's easier to find trees than it is to find flat ground.
Yep. So a little bit more complicated to set up, but they allow you to get just a great night's sleep.
Lastly, we had Bivy Sacks. The main advantage to Bivy Sack is they're super light, they're relatively cheap, and they're very compressible. The con is there's not a real lot of protection from the elements. You're gonna have to carry a standalone tarp most of the time. And they kind of give you this like coffin vibe to them.
Yeah, and it's almost getting to the point now too where ultralight tents are getting close to
basically bivvies.
They're basically a bivvy.
Yeah.
They're getting close to around the same weight.
So that's it. That's a quick little rundown of multiple different shelter types. Andy took you through regular tents, ultralight tents, hammocks, then we had bivvies. For the beginner backpacker, we're probably going to recommend you just start off with a tent, like a big box tent.
Yeah, I mean they're cheap, readily available, and that at least gets you outdoors.
Yeah.
And gets you can experience backpacking right away and don't have to worry about difficult setups or lay directions. So that most people will walk into an outdoor store and purchase your basic freestanding tent. That's the most common.
Yeah, and then if you find you really like tents and you really like backpacking, maybe take a look at an ultralight tent. But of course we are biased, and you should check out hammocks, because even though hammocks might not be for everyone, they are by far, in our opinions, the superior shelter system. But to a beginner, I don't know if I would recommend jumping to a hammock right away, because there's a lot of different nuances to hammock camping, and there's a lot of little things to get right. So we're probably just going to recommend going out, starting with a standard big box store style tent.
Yeah, get on the interwebs, do some research.
Yeah, check it out. So thanks for watching this installment of Backpacking Basics, and stay tuned for the next episode.